little bit of a late start as I'm figuring out my new computer, but I think I got it. Some things, probably for today's video. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Coleridge first, then we're going to do Don Juan. I tend to talk about Coleridge too long. It's just something that happens. Did anybody actually read? Let me see. I think I have it assigned. It's just not. Did anybody read Epitaph?
I did.
Because we're going to spend more time on Epitaph than you might think, considering that it was assigned. In fact, I may take to William Wordsworth and make that a blue one next time. So a lot of people talked about that one. I don't care about it. Like, the only reason I assign it is because it's got William Wordsworth's name in it. And I'm like, hey, look, guys, it gives us an excuse to talk about how Coleridge and Wordsworth were friends. That's about it. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. Probably in about as long of a length as we had here. Unless people want to give me a justification for why we should talk about it longer, in which case you can make that justification, but otherwise I'll probably end up just moving on once we get to that point. Oh, wait, I don't have my Windows selected. Hold on. There we go. I'm trying something different with the recording today, so if you happen to notice the recording doesn't come out as fast or it doesn't look quite as good, I'm testing out this new webcam. I tested out over it's not a new webcam, it's just the circle in the top of it. It's right here, like the other one is. Joe? The other one, when I was rendering the other day, it's gotten slow to the point that when, like, for example, I started talking and I was like, all right, everybody, today we're going to be talking about Wordsworth, and I couldn't tell if it was a problem of the video itself that I took or if it was a problem of slowness in the rendering process. But regardless, I couldn't do that. And I think it's changes that have probably come from Windows 10, driver updates, various things that happen over the course of 3 years that slow down a computer. And the problem is I have to bring laptops because everybody's like, oh, just build a PC, which would be great, except I can't cart the PC to class and then bring it places and like, oh, I'm in an airport, I could do some. I don't go to airports. I don't know why I use that example. I'm like, oh, we're at McDonald's and I have to do some. I don't even eat McDonald's. Where do I eat? El Phoenix on occasion, I guess. Chipotle. That's what. But I don't eat at Chipotle. I take it home. I don't know. I take my laptop various places and grade in various places, take notes and all kinds of things. I might even, in fact, today after class, I'm going to kind of edit the video is what I always do. Then I go home and set it up to render. So because I'm always on the move and doing things quickly, I need a computer that's going to be fast. And usually I get a new computer every 3 years. I hate Apple computers so much. It's really weird, too, because I have an iPhone. And oh, crap, my Pokemon's on. Go away, Pokemon. But, so, I mean, you might see it takes a little time. Now, I have noticed something about Camtasia, the program. I guess if computer specs are not high enough, it will not allow you to film in the widescreen format. Have I talked about this before?
No.
It'll let you do it, but the frame rate's like 4 frames a second, which looks like, like, those YouTube videos where people, like, they're giving you reaction videos for, like, you search and you're like, I really like this show. 13 Reasons Why. So you're like searching for like videos with the cast and interviews or something. And what you get instead is somebody's reaction video to 13 Reasons Why, where they put a video of people being interviewed, a picture of people being interviewed as the thumbnail. Then you click the video and instead you see some kid going, all right, guys, listen. I just watched like half the first episode and like, oh my gosh. And then like you see him just all over the place. It's like the worst video I've ever seen. You know how I got so many views? Yeah, I didn't want that to happen with my videos. It always sounds like I'm going nowhere, and then I bring it back. You notice that? It's just always every time. But I did notice that when I recorded in the widescreen format yesterday on my test video, I guess the computer specs are high enough that Camtasia will allow me to have a 30 frame rate with the widescreen format, and it can record the screen at the same frame rate. So it doesn't falsely lower my frame rate because it thinks that my computer can't keep up. So because I make this such a big part of my teaching now is the recording and uploading of videos for every class every semester. I did that in y'all semesters too, right? You? Maybe you, yes? I know I had you literally just last semester. I had you last semester too, like in the spring, or was it fall? Okay, that feels so long ago. Like every time we get from the fall, it's like, whoa, it's been so. Nobody cares. So that might take a little extra time today. In fact, it might take a little extra than normal because most people, they visited their families on like July 4th weekend, right? But because there was no weekend, it was just a Tuesday. I wasn't able to do that, and we have a new baby, and my wife's parents, they would like to, see her more often. So we're gonna be driving to Burleson, Texas, like 2.5 hour drive. So we gotta go home, finish packing, drive, be there, and so I'm not gonna start the render until probably around anywhere between 8 and 10, maybe even 11 if I go, oh crap, I didn't do that thing for class. And then I'll set the computer up and have it start rendering. Strangely enough, I thought it would render the stuff faster. So it didn't really render it any faster, which is disappointing. It just makes the computer not work like a horse the whole time it's rendering. It's just like, oh, it's cool. We're chill. And I'm like, come on, go faster. I guess it's just a slow process. So today, are there any questions about any of that stuff? Oh, I did forget to mention one more thing about the video, which is the whole reason I started talking in the first place, which is I'm going to tack on some of the synthesis analysis essay discussions like I did last time to the end of this video so people can get a refresher on synthesis analysis if they need to. I can summarize it real quick for you guys, though. Basically, you need to very briefly summarize it. It doesn't even have to, maybe you don't even have to summarize if you don't want to, because I've read it. Whatever it is that you're writing about, I've read it. Unless you start writing about contos in the future from Don Juan, and I'm like, it's been a long time. One time somebody was like, let me talk about like the later chapters of Gulliver's Travels. And I was like, it's been a while. So you just a couple lines telling us what the story is that you're doing. Then you give your opinions about it, and you give the personal experiences that reflect why you think what you think. Specifically, like I'm trying to get you to figure out what it is in your history that has caused you to think a certain way about a certain thing. If it's a poem about religion and you've gone to church all your life, say, hey, I've always gone to church and I've heard this differently, so it's interesting seeing this. Or, maybe if you're, I don't know, what are other things? Like, I play sports, and so Beowulf really resonated with me. Like, I'm the hero in sports. Like, it made me feel like heroic. I don't know. Usually it's not quite that complicated of a relationship. I see people do it, and they're like, wow, this poem is about somebody who died. Now I know somebody who died. Not like, wow, the hero is a metaphor for me as a sports person. That's like usually 2 steps too. Usually that's like research paper material right there, right? Except I would not allow you to write about sports because I don't care on a research paper. You would send me the thesis, and I'm like, that's not a really big world issue. It's like when people are like, hey, let's write about how we need an NCAA championship. So, have they done that yet? Or is it just still like bowl games? Wow, nobody knows. That's cool. They don't have like a Super Bowl style get to the end, whoever wins thing, do they? NCAA football. Like people were always like saying, Obama, you need to make that happen. I was like, how can Obama make so stupid? It doesn't make any sense. Even Trump, like if somebody's like, Trump, make this happen. Actually, Trump would probably try. Executive order. I would really love to see. I would just like to see what happens if Trump like wrote an executive order about you have to have a playoff. That would be really funny. Like I wonder what would happen. I don't know that he would actually do that. It'd just be funny to see. All right, so let's go to Coleridge, a man who was actually pretty good friends with Wordsworth. At one point, I think he lived about 4 miles away from him, and then later he lived about 11 miles away from him. As you saw into William Wordsworth, they kind of had a fight at one point that lasted, I think, quite a few years, or like a disagreement of some kind. And he's apologizing to him and to William Wordsworth. Coleridge it's so interesting. Did you know that Coleridge and William Wordsworth often like half collaborated on stuff? Like, what's weird to me is that doesn't make any sense. Like when I think about it, when I think of Rime of the Ancient Mariner, Kubla Kahn,
Kubla Kahn for sure.
Those are my two favorites. So what was the other? Well, that was the only ones. And then it's William Wordsworth. And I guess Epitaph. But when I think of those poems, I don't think about the kind of stuff with Wordsworth. Wordsworth seems so far removed from his buddy Coleridge. And it says, I think, too, that Coleridge, like William Wordsworth, even like when the dead start rowing the boat in Rime of the Ancient Mariner, that was like a suggestion from Wordsworth. I think also when, what was the other big contribution he's had? Oh, I think the killing of the albatross, which like starts everything.
Yeah.
That was Wordsworth's other big contribution. And you're like, oh, well, so like literally the whole thing wouldn't have happened if Wordsworth hadn't said, how about the albatross gets killed? And you're like, oh yeah, good idea. And it just starts the madness.
It's kind of weird because like when I was reading around with the Ancient Mariner, I was like, I think Coleridge is really over like complicating these things, but I think it's just how he wrote it. I guess was overcomplicated to me. I don't know. It was harder for me to read. I was annoyed with it.
With the Rime of the Ancient Mariner?
Yeah, I was just annoyed with how it read. I guess.
I feel like he was. I feel like I see this in Rime of the Ancient Mariner and in Kubla Kahn, but I feel like in Epitaph actually as well, which we'll get to. But I feel like he was doing some really, whether he intended to or not, or I'm just reading this into it, it feels like he's doing some really creative stuff with the teller of the story, the reader of the story, and kind of like messing with either one. And also even, I think I was reading something that said that, and I know this is terrible, I think I read this on Wikipedia. I don't know how I ended up there, but I remember the other night I ended up at Wikipedia. I think it was like to see if somebody just took some comments from Wikipedia for the discussion post. But then I got like interested and kept reading. And I think T.S. Eliot was like, Kubla Khan's stupid.
I love Kubla Kahn.
And I was like, really, T.S. Eliot? I like T.S. Eliot. And he was like, I think it was because so much of Kubla Khan and his success relies on stuff that's outside the poem. And have y'all ever heard of the auteur theory in films?
The auteur theory?
The auteur theory. Basically it's French for author.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Oh, yeah. But basically, like when you say, I don't know if I'm gonna like this movie. Y'all heard of the movie Dunkirk?
Yes.
It's like a war movie.
Yeah, the new one coming out.
And like now they're putting on the screens and the TV for all the advertisements. I don't think that they were as prominently doing this before. Like they were saying from the director of The Dark Knight Inception, they put like Dunkirk. But I still don't think people were looking at that enough and going, oh, this is the guy who made those movies. So now they've started having TV advertisements where literally Christopher Nolan is pointing for people to do things because he's the director. They're like, and it's like showing him talking about his film on the commercial. People are like, oh, that guy, that's the Batman guy. Like, and they keep like showing it over and over again because there's this thing in like movies where like there's this auteur thing where something is basically
Is something like better received based on who the author was?
Yeah, I guess the person themselves, the director is considered the main author of like a film.
Yeah.
And that's like something that happens with films. And so we look at whether a film, like we look at how good a film is or like how good these other films are by connecting them to their director. When really, if you think about it, we should look at, I think T.S. Eliot was saying, we should be able to watch a film and regardless of anything that happened outside of it, we should say that film is good, that film is bad. And he wasn't talking about film, he was talking about literature. He's saying like from a start to finish on like a poem or a book, we should all be able to come to that thing fresh and new without having to look up any other stuff and have that be enough.
Like have our opinion solely based on like what is read rather than the authors.
Yeah, it should be like everything's in the four walls of the book, nothing outside. Like who is Coleridge? What is his life like? What did he do? Where did he come? He didn't think it. T.S. Eliot seemed like to disagree with all that stuff. He just said, look at the text, which is really interesting because T.S. Eliot's text has so many footnotes. Like when y'all see, remember the wasteland I showed you?
Yeah, you should.
Like he's linking it to so many other outside things.
It'd be almost impossible to get any of his references without actually having his side notes.
That's true, but I wonder. I guess you could technically say the footnotes are part of it, and we don't really have to bring his biography in. So maybe that's what he was. He's like, yes, it's really complicated, but it's all here.
Yeah.
with Coleridge, like his little description for here's how I came up with this thing is essential to Kubla Kahn. Now he's not quite doing the same stuff with Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Yeah, I was thinking, because I thought we were still talking about Rime, but then I remembered you said Eliot and like.
Yeah, right now I'm just sort of jumping around all things Coleridge and talking about the craziness of Coleridge's stuff. But I think that when you were saying, like, what was it, the one you said you didn't quite understand or didn't like was the Rime?
Yeah.
Okay. Originally, did you see, like, he had all those, like, ancient spellings? Like, those spellings that came from, like, antiquity? He had a whole bunch of mystical-sounding spellings.
Yeah, and then, like, those are the real ones where you have to, like, look at the footnotes to see what they're saying or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. And now he didn't do that, really, in this edition that we have. Whereas, like, it would have been, like, ancient, like, Ancyent is how he, like, wanted to have it. And, like, the first time they published it, it was that way. But him and Wordsworth published, like, a book together, and, like, some of his poems were in, like, I think Tintern Abbey might have been the same thing with Rime of the Ancient Mariner. It might have been a different book. But when they published it together, Wordsworth's like, dude, you're hurting our sales. Like, you've got to change all those spellings to, like, normal human spellings. And maybe...
It mentioned in the footnotes that they had to revise it a few times after the book was published or whatever.
Yeah, and he was like, he constantly would revise things and try to fix them. He never felt like they were permanent.
I think it would have been kind of like thematic to have it written like in the ancient like ways or whatever, because it would kind of show how old the Mariner is. It would have been even cooler if like all of the Mariner's lines specifically were written in the ancient way, but then like the wedding guests like rebuttals or whatever were written like commonly, because then it would have really shown how old the Mariner is.
That's true. I didn't think about that. He probably considered it, but then it's probably I don't know that he considered that. I really don't.
I just think it would have been cool and thematic.
Yeah, it would have been thematic. It's so weird. Like, I reread Rime of the Ancient Mariner last night. It's just so weird. But it's also it's probably the most modern feeling thing. He's probably the most modern feeling poet we've read so far. Like, stuff that you could connect to newer. Like, you know how people say, like, when you look at Edgar Allan Poe, you think, man, this is probably like an inspiration for all like modern, like horror type stuff.
He was
like the scary stories.
He was like coined as like the father of like that type of genre.
And see, I don't know for a fact whether he was. Like, he very well. There could have been others that really were the father, but
he was well known that's like stood out.
Right. But the thing that like the issue that I have is it's hard to tell exactly what Coleridge inspired, but I just feel like that sense of like literature that we have now where like it's very aware of itself, or like you have somebody who's telling the story and then like an outside narrator, and it's all complicated. Like, it's not just here's the speaker, they're the one speaking, and it may or may not be the author.
Which is typical of poetry.
Right. Because we always think, y'all written poetry before, right?
We've been in this class.
Yes. If y'all tried to write poetry before, I assume. Some of my new students, like you've never heard this question. And if you tried to write poetry, usually you write from your own perspective, right? Yeah. It's not like Emily Dickinson in the Snake poem in 1302. It starts off the book.
She puts her place in like a young boy's shoes, like seeing a snake for the first time or something.
Right. It's a young boy talking. Well, he's actually very familiar with snakes. He's like, yeah, I know snakes. We're cool. It's a little boy she's writing, and you're like, wait, I'm confused. So Emily Dickinson was a boy? No. Poets don't always have to write about themselves. And that's like something that you don't think about. Like, it just doesn't seem right for poetry. It all seems like it should be something coming from me, not from somebody else.
Because every time I see a poem that's like written up like from someone else's perspective, like the Ancient Mariner, I get like confused, and I'm thinking it's more of a story than a poem, and I kind of forget the format like I'm supposed to be like reading it. Because like with poetry, it's generally supposed to be like interpreted in some other way, because a lot of things are metaphors or allusions in poetry. But then like when it's from a different perspective, you kind of read it as more of a story, and you forget that all these things are not literal, and that basically everything in it is metaphorical.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to think of it in that sense of what I'm reading is intentionally fake. And I mean, of course that stuff had happened, like Beowulf had happened at that point, Canterbury Tales. Usually not a whole lot of short stuff. that I was familiar with. So I mean, people were writing stories and telling stories for a long time.
Yeah, and like I read those like they were actually stories rather than poems. I think that's one reason why they do so well with those stories.
What's just so different about Coleridge to me is I really feel like he had a lot of the stylistic little flares. Like I don't know if y'all all read this quite the same way that I did with the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, but some of the stuff stuck out to me on this reading that like hadn't stuck out to me before. I mean, it reads like it's this old like.
Kind of like a song, maybe.
Honestly, it sounds like, and now I'm not going to talk about this for. Then I heard this song by Jack Black and what's the other guy? Well, Tenacious D.
Yeah, Tenacious D.
Called Tribute.
Yes, probably.
It's a very silly song, and we'll probably end up watching it here in a few minutes to talk about Kubla Kahn.
Yes.
But you see that my finger's twitching. You see it?
Yeah.
It's weird. I'm not like worked up or anything. It's just one of those weird fame things. That's weird. I shouldn't even be. That song to me, I kept thinking about that song when I read this, like over and over and over again, because there's like that weird like forced mystical quality. You know, like there's a section where like he's talking to the devil on a road somewhere, and I was like, that sounds like something that could happen in this poem.
Yeah. Anything's possible in this poem.
It just the short, terse way that it's creating its stanzas, and it starts to take on this like odd movement. And like I'm just gonna start and read a little bit of it to kind of show you what I'm talking about. And then like I don't know if you felt like this way. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long grey beard. Oh, I know that's the other guy. Sorry. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stoppest thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. It almost has like a limerick, like a sounds like a nursery rhyme kind of deal.
Like I got so used to that kind of rhythm that when we got to the stanzas that have like 5 lines, it felt so disorganized that it like kind of made me jump.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that doesn't sound like the rest of the poem.
I don't know that I jumped, but I did have to change the way that I read it for sure.
I was very uncomfortable at those points.
And it says, he holds him with his skinny hand. There was a ship. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, greybeard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbour cleared, merrily did we drop. Below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he. Then he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon. The wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. I was like, I don't know, I started thinking, like, I started incorporating that into the reading, and it made a whole lot of sense. Which is weird, because, like, what is it? It's been a long time since I've heard a bassoon, but doesn't it sound like a deep, low, resonant clarinet?
Yeah, we call that foghorn clarinet.
So it's a kind of like, kind of like that a little bit.
No, the bass clarinet is not as deep as the bassoon. The bassoon is way scarier. You feel the bassoon sound in your bones. It's so deep.
Yeah, it's like a really, like, I can't imagine what the song would be, but it's like I don't know, just almost like, it almost sounds like a little bit like a foghorn.
Yeah, exactly.
It's an unnatural instrument. It's not like, it's an odd choice. Actually, it probably sounds like a giant oboe more than anything else, because the oboe is like a. Right here though, I started incorporating this in where I'm trying to think the best I can of like some bassoon song in the back of my head, and I can't think of any songs you would play on a bassoon intentionally. That were by itself. Like, what's a bassoon solo? Like, what is that?
Logan can tell you he played bassoon.
Like a solo?
No, we just rented one for what did we rent the bassoon for?
You didn't even have one? My band had one. You had to rent it for solos? It's so strange. So we had to learn to play it?
Yeah. That happens all the time. We rented a 4-string bass for another band.
Yeah. I mean, at least you get to go to college, though. So maybe that's where the money goes instead. because I was like, you have to have a bassoon. You're like, just rent one. So it says the wedding guest here beat his breast for he heard the loud bassoon. So I started imagining it this way. This is really weird, but I started imagining like the wedding guest. He's sitting there. He's like to the beat of the music, and so I started like incorporating that to like. So I kept hearing, what was it? Like, so once I got to like the parts, okay, I was like reading and here like the description. Yeah, I'm still beating my breast, but mostly it was like when the old man starts talking. He's like, and now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his oar, taking wings, and chased us out along. And I was like, it just started becoming like this song, and I was like, oh yeah, it's like I don't know, it's like, and it's like this sinister song like told like while somebody's beating their breast. And like then I got to imagine like people around them were doing it too, but like I know that wasn't happening because it's just this one guy who's like hypnotically entranced, like I have to listen to him. But it sounds like stylistically he's doing a lot of like crazy things, different things than what we've seen because it almost feels. Should I mention that? Yeah, I will mention this. It's these days. I mean, you'll probably can admit. This spectacle is a huge part of like our interest in things. When I say spectacle, I mean like the visual wowing of us. So like when y'all watch a movie, do you really hope there's like you know how they just move so fast these days? You ever watch an old movie and like it just crawls?
Yeah, it kind of bothers me that they move so fast, actually.
Yeah, I get kind of worried about. Like I think I read that the average shot length in The Dark Knight was like 1.7 seconds. Like the average length of a shot. So you're like when you're looking at a scene and then it switches to another thing and then it switches to another thing, 1.7 seconds. I was like, are you kidding me? And there's like long conversations that last like a while, but I mean still it's like the camera switches what it's looking at frequently.
Not only the visuals, but the plots are too fast nowadays.
Yeah, it's really hard to follow some of those things. And I've been recently. Did I tell you I've been watching Star Trek: Next Generation?
Yes.
It's such a. Did I talk to y'all about how slow it is?
No.
Okay, so the show. One of the reasons I think I never got into it. I tried watching it once or twice, like way back in the day. But suddenly, I guess now that I've been feeding the baby, I can turn it on with a bottle.
Yeah,
not like naturally. So I feed the baby, and I'm like, well, I can turn this on in the background. And the reason I can turn on the background is because it's so slow, and most of it's dialogue driven. And they literally, when they go to a planet, there's like one background they have.
Yeah.
For like, if you go to like a planet, it either looks just like Earth, or it's a less habitable planet. So they have this like rock stage somewhere they've built on like Star Trek Next Generation's like stage somewhere, and they changed out with different colored backgrounds. And you can tell it's a wall back there. You're like, that's a wall.
Is that the original series that you watched?
No, I'm talking about Next Generation. So it's like the one in the 90s.
Yeah, the original series is like from like the 60s.
Yeah.
It does the exact same thing, but actually it does like more special effects into the background kind of thing. Because like you mentioning that the 90s version is like kind of like a stagnant background or whatever is kind of bothering me because like the 60s version they did so much more with the background. Like they made like cages. They had people in costumes, aliens in these cages. That's just the first episode. First episode has like 3 different settings. It's so cool.
I can't speak to that. But I can speak to what I have seen on Star Trek. And then I have a reason for bringing this up, by the way. It's almost all dialogue. The show is like it's people talking about. Basically, it's like a show about diplomacy in like science fiction scenarios.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like how do we talk to these aliens without disturbing what they're trying to do? There's this thing called the Prime Directive, where you can't mess with a civilization. You mostly have to let it kind of go on autopilot. Like if it's going to be wiped out by like this massive like comet, then you just kind of have to let that happen because that's like what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, that's a theme in Doctor Who as well.
Interesting. I haven't watched that either. Well, I've started watching it and I couldn't finish it because it just was too goofy. Maybe I picked the wrong season. This is wacky. But this show is so slow that I can feed my daughter and like not pay attention to like half of it, and I still get the whole story, right? Because it's just slow moving and it's people talking. I mean, it's almost like sometimes I think that like our classroom discussions get more exciting than Star Trek.
Yeah.
And it's like space, like stuff I'm really into.
But it's like not.
It really bothers me too that they have like TV remotes that they use to shoot people with. Like, it's so unfunctional. Like, it's just very, and they just go, hold. And I'm like, they would kill you by now. Like, something would come and eat you by the time you were able to point that remote control. Because this is how slow they do it. Like,
Yeah, that's definitely
but it's probably because I'm now so used to like movies that we have these days. Y'all see the new Star Trek that came out? Like they've had that first Star Trek come out. It's actually pretty good, but people complain that it was more like Star Wars because it moves a little faster. But Star Wars doesn't actually move that fast, except for the Phantom Menace and all the ones after that. But so the Star Trek movie that came out was all about like action and moving things quickly and things blowing up and people getting chased. When the series itself wasn't like that, and a lot of people were complaining, like, "Oh, it should just be people talking and dialogue." I'm like, "Come on." Yeah, like I mean, so these days, we expect when we go to the movie theater to be wowed, not just in terms of like a good plot and to have people relate to each other and have relationships we can follow and have well motivated characters. We also want to be visually wowed by things. Like we want, even if it's like a dramatic movie, like. Well, that's a bad example. Why am I thinking of that example? What's a movie that like mostly just has people talking? I mean, I'm even thinking about like I was thinking about for some reason 50 Shades of Grey, which I haven't seen, so I couldn't talk to. Well, let's just say like a movie like the new like Nicholas Sparks movies that come out, like.
Because they're based off of books. So
They do switch between like beautiful shots constantly, and stuff is. What were you thinking of? I haven't seen that one either.
But the thing about Perks Being the Wallflower is it does have moments of like vibrant kind of like violence or like other kinds of things, and it's also the movie is told a lot through the soundtrack, so it's not just dialogue.
Adam Sandler's like awkward.
I have not seen it. But it's just, I don't know. It's like we have this expectation. And here's a problem. Have you ever watched those YouTube videos where the people are like yelling at you? Like y'all probably have, some of y'all have maybe gone back and tried to watch my YouTube videos and it's just me talking. And I'm not like one of those YouTubers where, let's just see if I can do it a second of YouTube. Hi guys, we're here today to talk about literature. Literature's a great thing. And then it cuts to like this other thing. And it's just, I don't have the energy to sustain. Like, I can't sustain that level of energy, possibly. Like, I have a passion for literature, and I'm energetic about it, like, but I'm not gonna, like, the way they all do these days on the YouTube videos. And, like, it's also, have you ever noticed how the best YouTubers, their cameras are so clear, and they do this thing, have y'all noticed the jump cut thing? Where, instead of, like, I guess it's unsatisfying how slow they were talking. So what they do is like the little moments where they were like, I guess, taking a breath or thinking, where they go, yeah, like imagine my class where I'm like sitting there like teaching y'all and I'm like, and then like, it was really cool. Yeah, and it's like cut, and it just cuts all the dead time out of it. So it's just the guys constantly like jittering and moving and like saying things really quickly. And sometimes they'll even cut their own words off and start the next sentence mid-sentence. So you're like, what's going on? And I think it's because for whatever reason, the faster things get in society, spectacle is really important to us. We need to be visually wowed. We need to be interested visually in things. And people think, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We can get more viewers by just making things more visually, like, amazing. And they do that all the time. And so I think what he's doing here is he starts kind of experimenting with different areas of things. And I actually think that it comes together and helps thematically, what he does. But when he's doing these short lines that almost have like this nursery rhyme type feel, but like with a heaviness. And then he's got this obviously fantastical story. It's not like one little magical element. It's like the whole thing seems like it's a dream. Like it doesn't say, it really was, what was it, his friend Crookshanks had this dream, and so he's like, oh, let me like turn this into a story. And he did. And the whole thing is just odd and it's telling. Did y'all feel like you were reading like Pirates of the Caribbean when you were reading it?
Yeah.
Like that's how I felt. I felt like I was reading. You did?
Yes, I seriously just.
Like it totally feels to me like Pirates of the Caribbean, and you've got like.
Especially the part where like the crew comes to life.
Yes.
That's blatantly parts of the crew.
And I really do feel like all those things that have come afterwards and had like these strange mystical elements. Like it really does feel like mystical elements where it's like a mythology with like a weird sort of like
English mythology.
mystical to me is almost like the only thing I can think of is like trashy magic, dirty magic. To me, mystical is not like mystical is like like I think of smoke, like mist. I think of mist, but it's like darkness. And like people like crystal balls, like predicting your future, like black magic, or it's like you think of other kinds of magic, and it's like somebody can shoot fireballs, or they can fly, or they can ride a dragon. But mystical is like in dark corners and sinister things happening is what I think of when I think mystical. And this whole thing has that weird mystical quality of like. What is the Black Pearl's the name of the ship in Pirates of the Caribbean? Where like you have dead people who are like running the ship, and it just has like I felt like oh man that's like they must have taken that from this because this is just so. If you think about how well realized this is, can you imagine like somebody having to do this? They wrote this before the age of like films that we have these days, where we see this kind of stuff happen all the time, and we don't think of like how many like he's the guy who inspired all the others. And the weird thing is, like, the justification he has in the beginning, the Latin. Did y'all read the footnote for that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Like, the Latin footnote? Like he has that weird bit of Latin that's just there.
Yes.
And then it says down below that what it comes from is the Archaeology Philosophicae, which I imagine it means philosophy of archaeology. And he says, I readily believe that there are more invisible than visible natures in the universe, but who will explain for us the family of all these beings and the ranks and relations and distinguishing features and functions of each? What do they do? What places do they inhabit? The human mind has always sought the knowledge of these things but never attained it. Meanwhile, I do not deny that it is helpful sometimes to contemplate in the mind, as on a tablet, the image of a greater and better world, lest the intellect, habituated to the petty things of daily life, narrow itself and sink wholly into trivial thoughts. But at the same time, we must be watchful for the truth and keep a sense of proportion so that we may distinguish the certain from the uncertain, day from night. And it's interesting that what he's talking about here, like the Latin, like I guess little bit that he has to start, talks about how he thinks that there's more invisible stuff in the universe than there is visible stuff. So the stuff that we see is merely the surface of everything, and the stuff that we can't see is actually everything. And he's trying to point out maybe a couple of these invisible things as he sees them. And he's like that we also need to distinguish the certain from the uncertain, day from night. And it feels like this whole story is like couched in night, the mystical quality. I don't know, this whole thing just feels very, very original to me. And I used to not like it. I used to say that I was very annoyed by it. It felt like so cliched. But I think it's because he made this first, and then it became cliched. People were like, oh, yeah, I kind of like this kind of story. It's got so many unnatural things. Like, I was like, why would the guy shoot the albatross? It's a bird of good omen. What's like exactly? Well, that's why he made the decision. Do you want to guess the one thing that completely frustrates me about this whole thing, though?
I can't guess.
And he actually complains about it himself and says that if he could change one thing about it, this is what he would change.
Is it the type of bird?
Yeah, he wanted a lark.
That would have been cool.
No, I'm kidding. I just made it. It's like, was it the bird? Ah, yes. It's like he's like albatross. Well, I can't change it now.
Why the albatross though? It's so negative.
What do y'all think? I think I actually said it on somebody's reply. Like when I replied to them on or I gave the feedback on the discussion post. I think I actually said that.
I don't know if I was checking your reply.
Sad. First thing I do when I wake up is I see what Nichols said to me on my discussion post.
You, Nichols, see what Nichols said to you on what?
Every week I write a secret discussion post and I reply to myself. No, I don't really do that. Like, wow, there's some really messed up mental things going on there. That actually sounds like something that would appear in a Coleridge poem. He's talking to himself.
Was it the fact that this really didn't have a lesson for him?
In fact, no. That part I love. What I hate is very, very much related to what you said. And it's perfect because I was about to just sort of give it away, and you hit it. I would remove 3 stanzas. For the reason that he said down below, if you look in 1680 or 1682, depending on what your book, in the footnote number 6 here, it says Coleridge said in 1830, answering the objection of the poet Anna Barbeau that the poem lacked a moral. She said, this poem lacks a moral.
See, yeah, I saw that.
And he says, I told her that in my own judgment the poem had too much, and that the only or chief fault, if I might say so, was the obtrusion of the moral sentiments so openly on the reader as a principle or cause of action in a work of pure imagination. It ought to have had no more moral than the Arabian Nights tale of the merchants sitting down to eat dates. You know what dates are? It's like a little fruit, I think.
Yeah, they're like weird. Aren't they
Like kind of like weird little plums, right?
Yeah, they're dried plums.
Station J.
Oh, it's just dried plums? Oh, I didn't realize it. So it's like raisins, but with plums.
Yeah.
Well, what do you know? Never eaten dates. Now I kind of want a date. That sounds pretty good. Where do you buy those?
Walmart.
They have them at Walmart?
Yeah.
God, this is an exciting date. I know where Walmart is. I shop there. I go there sometimes. But the merchant sits down to eat dates by the side of a well. Imagine you're just chilling one day. You sit on the side of a well, eating some dates. You know, normal Texas stuff. And he's throwing the shells aside. I'm assuming that means the seeds, the pits, yeah. And lo, a genie starts up and says he must kill the aforesaid merchant because one of the date shells had, it seems, put out the eye of the genie's son. So he's just like, good dates. Throw the shell. Good dates. Throws the shell. Goes down the well, hits the genie's son in the eye. Genie comes up and says, I'm going to murder you.
Ooh.
I mean, it's not like the merchant. I mean, what's the merchant's lesson? Don't throw date shells down wells because a genie might. There's nothing you can really learn from that. It's like I'm walking and I go, oh crap, I stepped on a bug, and then God comes down and says, that was the God bug. You were cursed. And I was like, what? How are they supposed to know?
Is that like the same kind of thing with how like he shoots the albatross and now we're like now he's cursed because of this pointless.
Right, and that's how he wanted it to feel. He says like he wanted it to feel like he just kills this albatross and oh crap, bad crap happens.
Yeah, see like.
And it's has nothing to do with the bird being a bird of good omen. It's just like he really wanted to feel like, hey, look, a bird. Pew! And it's like, you're now being tracked by death and life and death, and you are cursed. And it's like, what?
Why?
Like, why? And he felt like there was too much moral there. I think a lot in these last 3, or the 3 stanzas prior to the last 2. So it's right after he's gotten done talking. He says, to walk together to the kirk and all together pray, while each to his great father bends, old men and babes and loving friends and youth and maidens gay. Or maybe it's just this one. I don't see what was wrong with that one. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell to thee, thou wedding guest. He prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. I find it odd that he says both, and there are 3 things, but beside that. He says, he prayeth well who loveth well, both man and bird and beast. So don't disregard the lives of beasts. He prayeth best who loveth best, all things both great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. So it's like, don't discount the life of anything. That little moral that he's given us. So, and actually, I think it's just those 2 last stanzas that I read that are the ones that I would get rid of. I honestly would have wished that it just went from to walk together to the kirk and all together pray, while each to his great father bends, old men and babes, and loving friends and youth and maidens gay. The mariner whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone, and now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of a sense forlorn, a sadder and a wiser man. He rose the morrow morn. I would love that he just says he's wiser, but like we don't actually get like the moral. Because to me, like the moral felt a little tacked on. I'm like, weird crap happens, and that's kind of part of the story. Is like, wait, why is this happening? Where did this come from? Why are they being chased by death and life and death? Why are they even being punished just for the killing of this one bird? And like, it kind of gives us back here even the reason why. You may have to notice the reason why the one thing that I always liked about this poem, and I kind of liked less this time, was that he shoots the albatross, and what happens to him? Like, what's his punishment?
The rest of the crew is killed, and he has to try to survive on his own for what was it, 7 days, 7 nights?
And what did they do? Like, what did all the people on the ship do to deserve death?
See, that was my problem.
You're like, they didn't really do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I read this time, and I did find something that I didn't recognize before.
I mean, I guess after a while they kind of allowed it. They were like, it's fine that he killed that because he took away the mist and whatnot.
And that's what it says. It says in part 2, so on 1667, in stanza, or like line 91, said, "And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe, for all of Erin, and I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow." And so it says in the footnote on the side, his shipmates cry out against the ancient mariner for killing the bird of good luck. Okay, so that they seem not cool with it, right? Then it says, "Nor dim nor red the God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. Then all averred I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. Was right, said they, such birds to slay that bring the fog and mist." And it said, "But when the fog cleared off, they justify the same, and thus make themselves accomplices in the crime." And I was like, so they were punished. And he killed the albatross. It's like, boom. They're like, he brought the wind. And they're like, oh, but he also brought the smoke and mist, and that's cleared up. So it's all good. So because they became, I guess, accomplices, it almost sounds like they're getting, like, punished. Like, remember, like, I like Eve in Paradise Lost. Those who have Eve in Paradise Lost. Because she does stuff, Adam merely reacts to stuff.
Yeah.
You feel like if somebody's at least trying, they're almost like the hero in a story, whereas the people who are just reacting to things, they're not so much the hero. It almost seems like we're horribly punishing Adam worse than we are Eve in this scenario. It's like he goes, "Kill the bird," got him, and they're like, "No, why'd you do that? It's bad." And he's like, "I'm sorry." And then later they go, "I don't know, the smoke kind of went away, so it's cool." But they didn't even get involved in like the actual killing, and but you have to wonder, is the worst punishment here? Because I mean, the true punishment of the mariner is that he has to tell this story over and over again for like eternity. It seems like, I guess we're supposed to think that this is a worse punishment. It's crazy how hot this thing gets. I hear it. Y'all hear it? It's like going. Here's the thing. I shouldn't have to buy that. Like, the computer should be good enough that I don't have to do that. That one wouldn't. I didn't want the thinner one. It's just thicker ones were $2,800 this time. That wasn't last time.
All the thinner ones have heat issues.
Stupid. Okay. Not you're stupid. It's stupid. Let's see. So I felt like when I was reading this weird frustration, and this is weird. I liked the frustration. Like when I was frustrated about why does this happen to these people on the ship? Like why are they being punished? Why does he have to tell the story for all eternity? He at least gets to live, and they all just die, and then start like moving his dead bodies on the ship.
Well, some would argue that eternity is more of a curse than.
Well, I don't even know that he's necessarily going to be alive for eternity. He's just got to tell it till he dies.
Yeah. He seems like to be young in the film, young and reckless, obviously, and then way older when he's telling the tale. So maybe he's just waiting for someone to come by to tell it to.
No, it does say that whenever he sees the person that he has to tell it to, he always feels this crazy urge to just be compelled to tell. So it's not like, I'll tell you. It's like, this one. It's always like he's compelled to tell that one person. But the one thing that got to me is I wanted it to be like he has to constantly do it. Like once he's done telling it to one person, next person. But it says like it just whenever I'm doing anything, I just randomly have to tell somebody. And I'm like, that's not that bad. Like, you at least get little breaks. It's like I have to go tell this person. Like I wonder what the bridegroom actually learned from this. He's like, oh, that was weird. Or not the bridegroom, but like the guest of the bride. He's like, oh man, that was weird.
Yeah, he checked like the guest books. He couldn't find anything.
I don't know what he would do. Like I did. It's so weird. Like the whole thing is so weird, and I don't know. I like it. And I don't like the moral that's tacked on. Like, don't kill animals. It just seems so lame.
Yeah.
Like when I don't know why things or like why any of this stuff happened, it feels more effective than he was punished by God for killing a bird.
I think
Like, really, that's it?
in my discussion post, I was like really excited about Kubla Kahn, and then I was like, now the Mariner, that's the real trick here. Because it was so confusing to me, and like
Oh,
like
yeah.
I mentioned in the beginning, it was hard to read, and then you saying all this stuff, I'm like, it's the real trick, and that's the fact.
The funny thing is, the strange thing is, I don't think he thought that it was that difficult to understand, or he kind of wanted to feel, I guess, uncomfortable, make you feel like uneasy when you're reading it. And all these little footnotes he added to the side where because people were like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, did y'all notice some of the footnotes on the side? Not the ones on the bottom, but the ones on the side.
Yeah.
Literally said things that there's no way you could possibly ascertain from the text.
Yeah.
Like, and it was really weird. Like,
In fact, I actually thought that they were like, I thought they were literally just rephrasing the stanzas at some point.
And then you're like,
yeah, then I was like, that makes less sense.
like this stanza on 1668, it's like stanza line 131. It says, "And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow." Okay, that's what we have. Here's the explanation. A spirit had followed them, one of the invisible inhabitants of this planet. No indication of that. Maybe the word spirit has been extrapolated. Neither departed souls nor angels. How would I supposed to know that? Concerning whom the learned Jew Josephus and the Platonic Constantinopolitan Michael Psellus may be consulted. They are very numerous, and there is no climate or element without one or more. What? Like, was it what? Like, I didn't get that from the stanza. It's like adding info to the stanza that I could not possibly have known. And at one point, it's like talking about like the north wind, and of course, it's the wind from the north pushing us to the south at the South Pole. And I'm like, what? What is this? It's just so weird. Such weird stuff. And it made me feel uncomfortable. I think that's kind of the point. And then he's got random dialogue in here. Are there any other things people wanted to say about this? Or, I mean, did you feel like it was effective? Or is it not to William Wordsworth, so you have no idea what I'm talking about? I feel bad for those who only read to William Wordsworth. Like, if you only read that one, like, you wasted, like, a whole possible research paper finding out literature week. You're like, yeah, I can write a research paper about William Wordsworth poem. Like, you could. I've had somebody do it before. I was like, eh. Like, what was it they said? Like, oh, it's somebody who didn't like, who had a falling out with their friend. And I was like, that's not worth writing about. Let's go to Kubla Kahn. Kubla Kahn. In fact, let's do like who like went straight to the poem first? Like you're like poem, or did you read the explanation?
I was confused where it started, if I'm gonna be honest. Because like it says the title, and typically it won't say the title until the actual poem starts. So
Yeah.
the title, and then I was like, okay, so this, and I was like, this is not a poem.
Well, let's read. Let's actually start then, since a lot of people seem to have actually started with the paragraph, as I actually explained, which I said I wanted you to. I said it was on 1680, I think, 1680, and that's exactly where the description starts. So you have to actually read the description, then I'll read the poem, then we'll talk about what the hell's happening here. And I think there is a footnote down below, but I don't know if I want to read it yet. It says, in the summer of the year 1797, the author, then in ill health, had retired to a lonely farmhouse between Porlock and Linton, on the Exmoor confines of Somerset and Devonshire. Okay, and he was in ill health a lot. Coleridge was. In consequence of a slight indisposition, an anodyne had been prescribed, from the effect of which he fell asleep in his chair at the moment that he was reading the following sentence or words of the same substance in Purchas's Pilgrimage. Here the Concubla commanded a palace to be built, and a stately garden thereunto, and thus 10 miles of fertile ground were enclosed with a wall. So he's reading that sentence, and the prescription that he had taken caused him to fall asleep. Almost every prescription back then, I assume, was some form of opiate.
Probably.
So it's like the stuff that they use today to make morphine, heroin. Shoot, even stuff like if you've ever gone to like the dentist, they may have given you like Tylenol 4 with codeine or hydrocodone. All of those come from opium.
Which comes from poppy seeds.
But you can't just eat a bunch of poppy seeds and get
Yeah, you have
that effect. So don't go out and people like everybody's buying poppy seeds. I don't even think they sell like giant amounts of poppy seeds in stores, do they? Because they are afraid that people were going to be trying to synthesize opium from it.
I think it's actually. I think it actually also has like health benefits of some sort though. Yeah, it's got nothing.
You have to get like a fresh poppy seed to squeeze out.
Opium.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they'll sell like.
Because like opium poppy seeds you buy are dried, so they don't have as much of.
So you have to have the liquid to synthesize the drug.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you'd have to literally grow poppies.
Because it's like milky.
Interesting. Okay. So he's reading this sentence, passes out from drugs. Okay. I'm sure someday you'll have to, like when you're like 60, you'll have to replace a hip, and they'll give you something to make it feel better. Well, not that. Hopefully. And it says that after he fell asleep, the author continued for about 3 hours in a profound sleep, at least of the external senses. So as you would say, he's sleeping. But he felt like it was like it put him like this weird drug dream. During which time he had the most vivid confidence that he could not have composed less than from 200 to 300 lines in his dream. If that indeed can be called composition in which all the images rose up before him as things, with a parallel production of the correspondent expressions, without any sensation or consciousness of effort. It was like everything was just happening for him. It was just there. On awaking, he appeared to himself to have a distinct recollection of the whole, and taking his pen, ink, and paper, instantly and eagerly wrote down the lines that are here preserved. Okay, so everything we have here, he wakes up, he's like, grabs a pen and paper and just starts writing. Oh my gosh, here we go. Like, as fast as he can, get this. You ever had like a dream, you wake up and you try to write down what it was? Never have you done that before?
I tried to remember one. I was like, I'm going to remember this. And I wake up and I'm like,
Oh my gosh, I think I've done that like in the last few weeks. Like can you search notes? Dream. Let's see, random thoughts. No. I guess I never did do that. Well, I think I've done it before. I just don't believe that thing. But I mean, I'll have a dream sometime. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so weird. I need to remember that, and I'll try to write it down, just real fast. But for him, it's like even more important because what he's having is a dream that also helped him, like that has like a massive poem like composed within it. So he's like got to wake up and then write down as much as he can remember of it, like as fast as humanly possible. So as a writer, I mean, wouldn't you consider like if this is how you make your living, right? Or like this is like how like what you find to be the most important thing that you do as an artist, you would put a lot of attention to that, right? Like you'd be like, house is on lockdown. I'm finishing this as quickly as possible. I'm not speaking to anybody else until I finish what I'm doing, right? Wouldn't you do that if this was that important to you?
Yeah, definitely.
And you're like, I mean, imagine like the level of dedication that all of you probably have to, I don't know, this is how it is for me, like your family. And like, if somebody in y'all, like your family, this is how my family is. Like somebody in the family, something bad happens. Everybody's like trying to help them get out of that situation quickly. It just is. I'm not talking like criminal things. I'm talking like something bad. How like you got like a car wreck or something on accident. Somebody's like, hey, help! Do you need a car to drive? I can give you my car to drive for a couple weeks if you need it. You know, that kind of thing. So just like really being all about helping that person when they need help, or whatever it is in your life that's equal, where like I have to drop everything for this one thing. This is his thing. He's an artist. He's a writer. It's very important. And what happens after this makes me think this whole thing is made up. All of it. Because what he says next, at this moment, he was unfortunately called out by a person on business from Portlock and detained by him above an hour. And on his return to his room found, to his no small surprise and mortification, that though he still retained some vague and dim recollection of the general purport of the vision, yet, with the exception of some 8 or 10 scattered lines and images, all the rest had passed away like the images on the surface of a stream into which a stone had been cast, but alas, without the after restoration of the latter. Like what? Like, so he's got this perfect poem in his head. He's got to write it down. Starts writing. Oh, shoot. It's extremely important to me. And I'll go open it. And he goes and opens the door, and dude's like, "Hello, Mr. Coleridge. We have to have a discussion about some business from Pollock." And he's like, "Ah, yes, make it quick. I'm composing a poem." He's like, "Oh, yes, of course, Mr. Coleridge." And then, like, an hour later, he's like, "This is a pleasure to be doing business with you, Mr. Coleridge." And he's like, okay, I got blah. And he's like, all right, here we go. Crap. He's forgotten everything. I wouldn't, if I was that into it and I knew that I had it, and, like, it's going to be amazing, I wouldn't open the door.
Yeah.
Like, who is this guy? Is he still, like, so drugged up? He's like, as you write this poem down, it's really important. And he's like, writing it, knock, okay. And he just walks over there and he's like, hey, what's up? And then later he, like, sobers up and goes, oh, crap, I shouldn't ever have opened the door. Like, I don't know how drugs work, so I can't answer that. Nor should any of you ever know how drugs work ever. But that very well could have happened. I just have to assume that because he's a writer, there's no way he'd go open the door. If it was really that important, he really thought he had what he had, there's no way he would open that door. And so they have this poem right after this from Coleridge's The Picture of the Lover's Resolution. It says, then all the charm is broken, all that phantom world so fair vanishes, and 1,000 circlets spread, and each misshape the other. Stay a while, poor youth, who scarcely dares lift up thine eyes. The stream will soon renew its smoothness, soon the visions will return, and lo, he stays. And soon the fragments dim of lovely forms come trembling back, unite now once more, the pool becomes a mirror. So he even wrote about his sadness at what had happened later in other poems he had written. And it says, yet from the still surviving recollection in his mind, the author has frequently purposed to finish for himself what had been originally, as it were, given to him. And it says down, what is it in the Greek? I shall sing a sweeter song tomorrow from Theocritus's Ideals. But the tomorrow is yet to come. And as a contrast to this vision, I have annexed a fragment of a very different character describing with equal fidelity the dream and pain of disease. So that last little part is something that he wrote after the poem, which was tacked on to the end. Then he has the poem. Read the poem, and the poem is, to me, hilarious. Not hilarious in, like, its subject. But when I think of, like, the telling of it and how it came about, I'm laughing at myself. Which I would understand if you didn't do. And I always like trying to read it in this really dramatic voice. Because he's like, this is such a big deal. Such a beautiful poem that's being composed. And so I see, in Xanadu did Kubla Kahn a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. And I've got to I always try to, like, do a little drawing of what I'm imagining as I read this. So I'm going to try to do my best. But in fact, this deserves colors. If I can make colors happen. Colors. Watch me, like, pull all these colors out and I don't end up using any of them. Because I don't see, like, the kind of colors I need. Where's my blue? There's no blue down. Did it fall down to the bottom? So, I see, like, it says, we have a stately pleasure dome where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. So all I can see really is that, let me look at the camera here and see if I can make sure all this is on the camera. So let's see. Oh, this will go really far. Wow. So I imagine there's some kind of river here that's flowing. And then it also goes down into, I guess, some kind of, like, cave. I'm really bad at drawing things, by the way. Some kind of, like, have y'all seen those caves of, like, ice before that are, like, circular and they've got, like, ridges in them? They almost look like somebody's esophagus from the inside.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what it's talking about. Like the water goes down and then runs through like one of those type of ice caves down to the sea that is sunless. I'm assuming because the mountain's so high that it's blocking the sun that goes down there. So, you got the river and it's flowing down and then it kind of disappears into the landscape and then eventually comes out of one of these ice caves down and like almost shoots out at the bottom. But that's just an assumption I'm making right now. It's the worst drawing ever right now. And he says, so twice 5 miles of fertile ground. So I'm assuming 5 by 5. So we have this giant, this is the best I can think about this. So I'm assuming the river runs through this. So it's like this giant, 5 mile by 5 mile wall. So it's like 5 miles. 5 miles. With walls and towers regirded round. There's always big old towers. That's not a tower. There we go. There's one tower. Another tower, massive towers. Imagine how big these towers must be. They're almost the size of maybe the Empire State Building. They're so massive on the walls. And it says, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills where blossomed many incense-bearing trees. So there's pretty little gardens throughout this whole thing. Beautiful flower gardens. And probably the river flows through the actual place and hits some of these gardens along the way, and then it goes out of the city. If you think 5 miles by 5 miles, that's basically a city. Right? I mean, I'd say Greenville, if you look about a 5 mile by 5 mile on Google Maps, it's going to tell you it's basically from here down to a little bit past downtown, I would assume. And then that's going to go all the way over to where the curve is in I-30, I'm assuming, maybe even a little further. So it's a big place with a wall around it. And it says, and here were forests ancient as the hills enfolding sunny spots of greenery. So there's greens throughout, trees and stuff. And I got green. That's a color I do have. So get rid of these blackened trees. We will find all kinds. Here we another green. Take that. Look at green all throughout. Beautiful greens. Now it just looks like it's got green acne. This is not as good as I would have liked. I don't know. Pretend it's pretty. But oh, that deep romantic chasm which slanted down the green hill athwart a cedarn cover. A savage place. So there's all these there's this giant hill that the river runs down down a chasm. So I think it actually starts out where you see. Let's just assume this. I'm going to make this a purple river. It's the only thing I can do. So we see the river at first, and then it kind of starts to. We don't really see it anymore because it's a chasm. It's a deep, a canyon type deal, and the river's down in it, and then it goes into these little caves, and it comes out. Later, out of little caves. I guess I can make it little caves, little ice caves. Or the river comes out of it. I got marker on me. A savage place, as holy and enchanted as air beneath a waning moon, was haunted by a woman wailing for her demon lover. So it was just an image of a waning moon. It's not like it's actually here, but it's very enchanting, like a place with a waning moon and a demon lover who's been wailed for underneath that moon. Who wails for a demon lover? That sounds mystical again. It sounds like bad magic, dark magic. Demon lover. Who does that? It's that kind of environment where everything's kind of mystical. Next. And from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing. And so it's given us now the feeling of it, not just the visual description. A mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift half-intermitted burst huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail. And so I think he's actually talking about, maybe you can see this in here, but I don't really have a way of showing it. So as the chasm goes down deeper in here, imagine there's little waterfalls, right? Little waterfalls, and then they go down, and they're straight again, and then they're actually I guess a little ridge, and it goes and goes back down again in a waterfall. To the point where it says little bits of it's so forceful, little bits of rock are shooting out into the air when it goes, just forcibly shoots out of And it goes like that, little waterfalls all the way down, all the way down, all the way down. Oh, this is like that 80s color of ugly coats. Do you remember that? Like people wore like ugly coats in the 80s. Y'all weren't in the 80s, but you ever seen like, you look in somebody's closet and you say, oh, that's an ugly color. It's like Pepto-Bismol, but like worse. It was a popular 80s color. My mom had one of those coats. Or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And mid these dancing rocks at once in Everett flung up momently the sacred river. Flung it up. 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion through Woodendale, the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man. So there's like all these like secret like underground caverns near the end where it's like they go through here and there and then boom comes out and then oh it's there and then woo it's measureless, but apparently it ends over here. So it can't be that measureless. So they then reached the caverns measureless to man and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. So I guess the ocean down here is just lifeless.
There's nothing there.
And it's also sunless because the sun is like here, and I don't have orange or anything, I don't think. The sun is like shining bright, but because the mountain is so big, like the sun hits and it's blocked, and it's down to a sunless sea because the sun's not reaching the sea.
So what is this lifeless sea? Does it basically sort of mean that there is no life at all? Especially if the sun's not reaching down there.
I imagine I think it might mean like lifeless is in cold, dark, nothing's really happening down there to the degree that things are happening up here, where everything's like magical and mystical.
So like I can take
Right, and I think that there's actually a reason for that. And it's in the next couple of lines where he says, amid this tumult, Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesying war. And I think that there's maybe an implication there that because there's not anything going down at the sea is very kind of bland by comparison, the lifeless ocean. Maybe at some point the war that's coming is going to be brought on ships on the lifeless ocean, so they'll become full of life. They're like, oh, we never expected anything would come from the ocean to kill us. But I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Then he stops this stanza. So we're thinking, okay, war, right? War. Yeah. War is coming, guys. That's where things get interesting. You know, you hear like description of a place, but now we know war is coming. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves. So this shadow, this pleasure dome that's up here that it was talked about, I imagine is like the biggest feature of this, right? In the center, there's like I kept trying to look up pleasure dome on Google Images. No, I didn't end up finding any of the things y'all were laughing that I might have found. It was literally just, it kept telling me about mountains. But I searched castle on a mountain. I kept finding these pictures of like castles on mountains and like, they usually, if it's on the top of a mountain, it just has only saw castles, but I'm imagining here like almost like a Taj Mahal type situation where it's like massive and then like, wow, I'm really bad at this. Let's see, there's a circle, and it all is going to come up to this point, and then there we go. And then lots of pleasurable things are happening in here. I don't know exactly what. I'm assuming Pleasure Dome is like not the greatest pleasures. That's just an assumption I'm making. I don't know if it's true or not. And it floated midway on the wave. So the sun is actually hitting this, and it's going down here, and you see like the shadow of the Pleasure Dome down here because it's such a prominent feature and it's so big up there that it's going to cast its own shadow on the waves. And it says, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. It almost sounds here like he's repeating himself. You notice that? Like he's like, remember, like down here, there's the mingled measure of the fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. Like it's all happening here. Sunny pleasure dome, caves of ice. All the weathers. They're all here. Okay, here we go. I guess we're going to hear now the exciting part about the war, right? Let's do it. A damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. It's like almost like a small harp, isn't it? Like a dulcimer. Like ding 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 ding. Maybe.
You sound like you're describing them.
And he says it was an Abyssinian maid. Okay, so that's the one who's playing the dulcimer. And on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. And about Mount Abora It's from Paradise Lost. It says, where Abyssinian or Abyssin kings their issue guard mount tomorrow, though this by some suppose a true paradise under the Ethiop line. So I guess this is magical, mystical, pleasurable mountain. True paradise. And this is where it gets weird. As it says, could I revive within me her symphony and song? So it's like she was basically the muse singing to him about all this stuff that he'd written about so far. And he says, could I revive within me her symphony and song? He's like, if I could bring back what she was singing to me. To such a deep delight 'twould win me that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome. Those caves of ice. I would build you the sunny dome. I'd build you the caves of ice. And all who heard should see them here, and all should cry, beware, beware. Like, if you saw what I would finish, if she gave me the inspiration again, you would be like, whoa. Her flashing eyes, or his flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, which is a magic ritual to protect the inspired poet from intrusion. And close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. The ending is like the weirdest thing, and I think it's like magical in like such a special way. Like, I love it. Like, what we're seeing here is he's like, if I remembered any of this, I would finish writing it, but I don't. But I swear, like, if you read it, you'd be like, whoa, you'd be like so amazed. And then you like, so it's just not, it's not there. But if I could remember it, that's what I would do for you, is I would give it to you and you would like it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how he ends the, like, it's so weird. Like, it's such a weird way to end a poem. He didn't even like try to like guess at what the rest was. He wakes up, writes down what he can, then he just says, if I could remember the rest, you would be amazed by it.
And he's so stoned.
It's like a weird promise. And now I really don't think I have time to show this today. I apologize. If you want to afterwards, you can go to YouTube. Yeah, but it's a Tenacious D song called Tribute. And the song Tribute is where they said, one time we met the devil on the road, and the devil said, hey, play the best song in the world or I'll eat your soul. And so these guys are like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So they start playing, and it's the best song in the world. Like, it saves them. And they said, but the problem is they can't remember the song. So the song that you're listening to is called Tribute. It's a tribute to the song they once sang, which was the best song in the world, but they can't remember it. So sorry, this is merely a tribute to the song that was the best song in the world. Because they can't remember, they didn't write it down. They can't remember the best song in the world. Unfortunate, right? I have to feel like that's inspired by this, or like he didn't read it, but then he like came up with that on his own, and like he probably owes everything in the world that happened up to that point to him eventually coming into contact with this, because it's like the same story.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like his Kubla Kahn amazing poem Tribute. There's like a tribute to the greatest poem he ever wrote that he never actually wrote down. And if I could remember it, I would totally write it down, and like you would read it, but I can't, so sorry. Ha!
Maybe he just felt like he was like an inadequate poet to like recreate such a vision or whatever. I'm just defending him, but you can think what you want.
You can defend him. I defend what he did. I love this.
Yeah, it's happy.
Like I think that a lot of people the fact that it's so contested as to whether or not it's good, or like whether you can consider the history behind it. We've seen these kind of things pop up now. They try to make these really immersive experiences for a lot of things. I'm not talking like when you Despicable Me is coming out, and look, there's advertisements on the Father's Day movies at Walmart. Like, oh yes, buy this movie and go see Despicable Me in theaters. Like, I'm not talking about really immersive advertising where like it's everywhere and you can't avoid it. I'm talking like once upon a time I watched a show called Heroes. Did you ever hear about that show?
Yeah.
It was really good for the first season, and then like there was a writer's strike, and so they tried to move along without writers.
Yeah.
It went about as well as you would expect. Like, the story was stupid and nobody wanted to keep following it. But that first season, from the very beginning, they started having like graphic novelists who would write a comic book that would do like stuff that was in the show you didn't necessarily have to know, but it added to the show's storyline. So it's like you had a graphic novel that added to the show's storyline that went along with the show, and you could watch the show and enjoy it without it. or you can watch this graphic novel. And now it's very risky for them to do anything that's not quite like that these days. Like we already kind of do this. We already kind of factor in stuff that's outside a piece of literature as to whether or not we like it. Did you ever hear of a book called A Million Little Pieces? You ever heard of that book before?
No.
I'm pretty sure I have the story of this right, and if not, it still works as an example because it could happen. So there was this book, and it was like this guy who's like a recovering drug addict, and he like all this like crazy stuff happens to him, like he's having sex on the streets with other men, and he's not homosexual, and he's doing it for like drugs. So he's like got to that low point in his life, and then later he eventually becomes a writer and writes a story down, and like he becomes successful. So he's like all these things he's doing and like lowering himself and doing things that he's really not comfortable with just to get his next drug fix. And a lot of people were inspired by this book, and Oprah read it, or Oprah at least knew some people who did read it, and then she put it on her list. Had the guy on the show, and he's like, yeah, this was, it was a rough experience, and so I wrote down, all this stuff. But later it turned out that the book wasn't true. Like, the book was not actually his life. And there were lots of details that didn't line up with where he was at certain times. Like, when he says that this happened here, like, he wasn't there. Like, there's no way that that could physically be possible. People started, like, investigating it, and they said, like, yeah, this isn't real. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think that he originally, to the publishing companies that he went to, tried to market it to them and say, I've written this fictional autobiography. I think I moved this screen, unfortunately. Let's see this. No, that's actually right. This doesn't look right. He's like, I wrote this fictional autobiography of a druggie. And they were like, no, we don't want that. But I think at one point some publishing company said, if we just publish this as like a legit autobiography, it might actually get people who would want to read it. So we might have more success there. And he's like, yeah, but it's not. They're like, but do you want to sell your book or do you want to not sell your book? And he's like, fine. I mean, think about like if you recorded a YouTube video, right? And like with your phone or like however people do that these days, or like this, and you say some little like lie in there, like no big deal. Or here, let's better example. Remember the kid who did this like CNN, and like he made that graphic or that GIF that was like Trump punching CNN in the face, like in a wrestling match.
That was awesome.
And he posted it online. And then like they tracked the kid down, figure out who the real guy was. And like they looked at his like whole like post history on Reddit, and it was a whole bunch of like anti-Semitic, like anti-Jew, anti-homosexual like stuff. And he was like, I just want to apologize. He came out and was like, I just want to apologize. I didn't know like I'd ever be tracked down. Like, I don't actually think these things. I just do this for. He basically just said, I just do this for internet points.
I do it for
Like, I do it for like upvotes on Reddit. That's all he does it for. Like, he just knows that there's content that he can peddle to certain people, and they'll eat it up and give him upvotes. That's the whole reason he's even doing it. It's like he doesn't believe any of the stuff he's saying. He's just doing it because it's popular. That's it. And so think about like if somebody found like your like the stuff that you did to try to get attention online, and then like that became like
all you were known for.
like all you like suddenly like it's all in front of your face, and like he's like, here it is. Well, this happened to the Million Little Pieces guy. They tracked down the story. They like investigated. They said, and then Oprah brings him on the show. So you do an interview. He's like, yeah, I'll do an interview. And she's like, you duped us. You duped us. You said this is a real story, and it's not. And he just kind of was like defending. He's like, look, if you read the book and you like the book, what does it matter what the true story is behind it? If the story speaks to you, does the person outside the book have to be like, what does that matter? I mean, you should just be able to read a book and go, this is a good book. Not like the only reason this book matters is because of the story behind it. Kind of like people are like, or at least my daughter is. I don't know if anybody else is really into that play that you can't actually watch, Hamilton, right now. Have you ever heard of that play?
Yeah.
My daughter, for some reason, got really into it. And I'm like, there's no way you could possibly see this thing unless it's like a video recording on YouTube that somebody just put up illegally. But she's into it. And she keeps talking about how it's like a true story. But like, would the play still be good if like Hamilton was not a real story? And like there was not like a really Alexander Hamilton. It was like a whole made up story about it. And like I imagine she would be like, no, that's not as cool. Like it's just something about like we want a story to be true. Like regardless, the whole point is we pull in stuff that happens outside of the story and make it part of our understanding of it, and then we use that to judge whether or not it's good. And I think that just having that be a part of our discussion of this makes it fantastic. Just because it gets us talking about whether or not you should be allowed to consider things that happen outside a work of literature as stuff that says whether or not it's a good work of literature. I mean, what do y'all think the answer is? Should we consider this stuff? Should we not consider this stuff? Is it good on its own?
I mean, it's a good book either way. I didn't know the backstory to begin with, so I wouldn't know.
I mean, I've always liked to consider that maybe the backstory's fake.
Yeah.
Like he's just messing with us. I like that the most.
I mean, if it has a legit backstory, like, good on them. But if not, it's very, very good.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, there's a lot of people who don't like. Have you ever heard Shia LaBeouf?
Yes.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who don't like him. They said like he plagiarized some stuff from somebody one time, and then he apologized for it on Twitter. And they found out his plagiarism was his apology was a plagiarized apology. Like he used somebody else's apology for one time plagiarizing and used that as his apology. In fact, Coleridge, and I'm not saying that Shia LaBeouf is as good as Coleridge. I'm just saying like this stuff that's outside and like being introspective and like almost like a lot of the times people call this like postmodernism, where it's like literally the thing itself is aware of itself. And I haven't studied postmodernism in a long time, so I might be getting that a little bit wrong. But postmodernism, a lot of the works there were like literature and film and stuff are like aware that they are a film and are speaking about the fact that they are a film in the fact that they are a film. Kind of like breaking the fourth wall. It's almost like when you have like it's like stuff that refers back to itself frequently.
Like when things are really meta.
A little bit, like a lot of the stuff that things are meta these days are like very similar, I guess, to what happened in postmodern. In fact, I probably need to go back and study. It's been a long time. I can't even say whether or not what I'm saying is accurate anymore. It's been a long time since I've studied American Lit. But I think that awareness of stuff that's happening outside literature comes from Coleridge, and he really got the discussion started and really made it important. And that's the thing that we still worry about today. Strangely enough, I just kind of want to say to William Wordsworth, I had that one because it was just giving me an excuse to say that him and Wordsworth were friends. They had a falling out. Interestingly, when they lived 4 miles apart, the reason they stopped living 4 miles apart was because I think the town complained. They thought that they were spies for the French Revolution.
Okay.
Because they were smart people who kept meeting together, and they were like literature people, and they were like, this is suspicious.
It's like they're just friends.
So they basically ran him out of town, and like they wouldn't renew his like rent or lease or whatever.
Yeah.
So one of them couldn't leave, like one of them couldn't stay, and like they had to separate. And then eventually they got back to like where they were 11 miles apart eventually. But there was this whole thing where like he was mad at him for a while, I think, for some disagreement they had, and I imagine it also probably had a part to do with his politics, because William Wordsworth kind of started having a little bit more. I don't know why, it's like writers and literature writers tend to, like the great ones, they tend to always be more on the progressive side of whatever the politics are at the time. Like they tend to be moving toward new ideas rather than sticking kind of to the old ones. And Wordsworth started having very conservative politics at the time, and that bothered some of the other poets. And I think that probably was what they had a disagreement about, but I can't remember quite. But I want to talk about Epitaph. And this is a poem that I think, the reason I don't like people to write about it is people always get it wrong. I want to read Epitaph. It's on 1708, maybe 1710, depending on your edition. And his epitaph, and it says it's written by Coleridge the year before he died. One version that he sent in a letter had a title, Epitaph on a Poet Little Known, Yet Better Known by the Initials of His Name than by the name itself. I think actually, Cheyenne, you referred to him in one of your posts as STC, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember seeing that and going, did you read Epitaph? And that's where it stuck. Was that where it came from, or you just decided to just abbreviate his name?
Yes, it came from the top.
Okay. Because I had never thought about that before. I was like, oh, that was impressive. It just popped up. But yeah, they're talking about it here. So he says, this is on his, actually, I don't know if this actually was on his, I don't think it was actually on his tombstone, but it was an epitaph written about him by himself, which is interesting. And by the way, epitaph, let me make sure I've got the definition for this right.
Isn't it like something written on a gravestone?
See, I always thought it, but I don't know that he actually had it on his gravestone.
Well, I don't think he did. I just thought he wrote it as like a rough draft of what he might have wanted on his gravestone if he were to pick it out.
It says something written or said in memory of a dead person, especially words written on a gravestone. So usually it is words written on a gravestone, or it can be something that's just said commemorating somebody. And so it's very interesting that he wrote his own. So he wrote his own words to remember himself by.
Me.
Which is very interesting.
No one else is going to do it for me. Yeah.
And it says, "Stop, Christian passerby, stop, child of God, and read with gentle breast. Beneath this sod a poet lies, or that which once seemed he. Oh, lift one thought in prayer for STC, that he who many a year with toil of breath found death in life may here find life in death. Mercy for praise, to be forgiven for fame, he asked, and hope through Christ. Do thou the same." I've always wondered whether or not I actually believe this and think it's sincere. One, he wrote it himself, about himself, which is very interesting. And it's a little bit different than what you'll later see with Yeats, where he wrote what went on his tombstone, like for real. I think it said just cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by. That's all he wrote on his. But this is a very long thing that you would imagine would get. Imagine how hard it would be to get this onto a tombstone. Like tons of letters. They says, "Stop, Christian passerby." So first of all, it's like the poem itself is kind of humble-ish, right? A little bit humble, at least according to the words that follow. But it says, "Stop, Christian passerby." So somebody who's walking along just doing nothing. It says, "Stop." Okay, well, stop. Okay, I gotta look. "Stop, child of God." It almost seems like it's buttering up the person who stopped. "You're a child of God." I am a child of God. You're right. Thank you for noticing. "And read with gentle breast." Okay, so he's imploring the person to, with very gentle breast, read. So he's giving us how we should read it. Okay, giving us instructions for how we should approach this. So, in a kind way, a gentle way, we should approach the person who wrote it. "A poet lies, or that which once seemed he." Oh, wait, I'm sorry. "Beneath this sod, a poet lies, or that which once seemed he." I don't know, something about the word sod.
Sod?
Something about the word sod.
Well, it has a double meaning. A sod as in an idiot.
Oh, right.
Or a sod as in a church over.
Right. I guess the word sod itself seems falsely humble to me.
So, like, even more.
So it's like merely a small sod of earth. And I actually think of like it's not the same meaning. But I think of also the similarities that the word has to the sound of the word clod. It's not the same thing.
Like a lower person?
Well, not just a little chunk of earth. Like a tiny... And I will look up the word sod just to make sure that I've got... It's been a long time since I've mowed lawns, but we might have had a different definition. I hope we didn't. No, I don't want daily inspiration. Turf. Also, the grass and forb-covered surface of the ground, one's native land, to cover with sod or turfs. Bugger? No, that's not the same meaning here at all. Dam. A bugger? If I ever find the sod, I'll kill him. Oh, okay. Oh, bugger is like, didn't it the F word? A worthless person? No, not necessarily.
Yeah,
so it could mean a worthless person, and beneath this sod, to me, it just seems like a little chunk of grass, a little chunk of.
We're not allowed to write on that for critical evaluation.
What do you mean word? You already turned it in?
No, I was considering it as well. But it's a short poem, and I'm pretty good at those.
I just don't want people writing their discussion posts about it. I mean, it's possible you could write about it, but it'd have to be really good. And you'd have to pick one word.
Yeah, of course. I've done that before.
So with this here, it's beneath this sod, a poet lies. So to me, sod is like, it's talking about specifically a small amount of earth, not a very big one, not like beneath this land, beneath this grass, beneath this dirt. It's using the word sod, which implies a small area of. To me, it's like falsely humble. It's like saying, I'm just under this tiny patch of earth. And I just feel like that's like saying I'm small, I'm little. But he's having me stop to read, right? So he obviously thinks he's more important than just a small thing, because he's having me stop. No, seriously, stop. Stop, Christian Bachelor. Stop, child of God. Well, what? So he's imploring me to stop already. And says a poet lies. And I actually think that there could be more meaning in that word there. Because he's lying down, but also he's lying. He's a liar. He's already told us with his other poems things aren't real. Like we have fiction going on with the Kubla Kahn. Who knows if that's real? And he says, and this is this false humility again, or that which once seemed he, a poet. Like he says, a poet lies. No. Even more humble. That which once seemed he. Like he once seemed a poet, but he is not now, for he is dead. Like, I don't know, I just feel like you were a poet. Like, or once seemed he, you were a poet. Like, you know you were a poet. Like, you're pretending that you're being humble here, and you're not actually. That's how I feel. And so at this point, I'm kind of suspicious. And he says, oh, lift one thought in prayer. One single, like, there's an implication to me, like, one single solitary tiny little thought. When really he just means probably all your thought while you're standing here. So lift one thought in prayer for STC. And he, like, marginalizes himself further with the initials. I just feel like this is not real. Like, he's just pretending he's humble.
And he's, like, satirizing, like, other epitaphs. Because epitaphs tend to be humbling, or they're, like, more in condolences. Like, they're more directed towards the family of the dead rather than the dead themselves.
Yeah, and usually the person didn't write their own, right?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So it's like, let's remember him. He's like, let's remember myself.
Yeah.
In case people don't do it right.
So it's even more self-entitled. Because it's literally self-entitled.
Yeah. Let me see. I'll lift one thought in prayer. Oh, I had one more thing I was going to say. STC. No, I forgot it on my own. I'd already forgotten it. Oh, what was it? Or that beneath this thought a poet lies, or that which once seemed he. Oh, lift one thought in prayer for STC. And why would he mention a poet if he really didn't? If he says I merely seemed a poet? And I feel like too, like people who are writing these things, like if people have these things written about them, it's not always about how small and humble they are. You know what it reminds me of? You ever heard of the stories in the Bible about the Pharisees who would pray in the streets?
Oh yeah.
And like imagine like this is like you get the guy, he's like, I'm a man of God. He's like, oh Lord, please keep me humble.
Yeah.
Keep you what? Humble, I said. I'm very humble.
It's always annoying me. In like any biblical story, I'm annoyed.
It feels like he's the poet version of a Pharisee, where he's like calling out his own smallness to imply to keep people listening the whole time. He's like, I don't know.
When you point out your own humility and like when you claim that you're super humble in general, it always makes you sound more egotistical.
I once seemed a poet under this tiny sod. Just lift one tiny thought in prayer for me.
I don't know. Maybe he's talking about how Wordsworth was more famous than he.
Boy, that is true.
Yeah.
That he who many a year with toil of breath found death in life may here find life in death. That very well could be sincere. For the whole time, he was sick for so long, and he always was on drugs that probably kept him sick. I think that he was prescribed laudanum, which is opium dissolved in alcohol. So if the opium doesn't do it, there's the alcohol on top of it. It's weird. And he says, give me mercy for praise. And by for in both cases here it means instead of. Mercy for praise, and to be forgiven. So mercy instead of praise, I would like. And to be forgiven instead of fame. He asked and hoped through Christ. Do thou the same. Now he wrote his own, so it's really I asked and hoped. But it's because he, so it's like it's not himself, it's somebody else talking about him. It's like when you're afraid somebody's going to screw up your epitaph, so you write it.
Obviously.
But
I don't know. I think
that shows how much smarter you think you are than everybody else right there.
I also think that part could be sincere because he was so sick for so long. Like he probably was comforted by his faith, and that's probably one reason he thinks that was gonna mess up his epitaph. He's like, I want you to mention this bit. Like I want you to mention how I begged for this from Christ.
I think that the life and death he actually wants is this.
Yeah.
Us sitting here, a couple hundred years later, talking about him. That's the life and death he wants. He wants the praise instead of the mercy. He wants the fame instead of to be forgiven. That's what he wants. He asked and hoped through Christ. It says here that it only could mean instead of, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Y'all ever made a trade? Like, have you ever traded something with somebody?
Yeah.
You know, like baseball cards or something. Like you didn't want you had two of these cards, so you made a trade. So you're like, I'll give you this for this.
I trade video games.
Oh, games. Yeah, you're like, I'm done with this one. You have played one I haven't played. Let's trade it.
Yeah,
I traded my Pokemon cards.
Right. All those things you traded, you phrased it how, right? You would say, I'll give you this for this, right?
Yeah.
This for this. He's like, please give me mercy instead of praise. Or maybe mercy for praise. I'll give you this for this. I'll give you mercy for your praise. Like, I'll give you the mercy for the praise that you could give me. And I will also give you my forgiveness for the fame that you could give to me. So I think it could go either way. Where it's saying instead of, and I don't think that's the only way you can interpret it. You could say, like, he's trading one for the other. He's like, I'll trade my mercy from God for a little praise and death. I'll also trade my forgiveness for some fame. He didn't strike me as a fear of God type guy. Like when I was reading what he'd written.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a huge concern for him. I just found this thing to be so odd and false every time I've read it ever.
Are you personally offended?
No, I'm delighted by how false it is. He's a man of falsities. I think he's like a magnificent liar, and he's also, I feel like an opportunist. Did anybody happen to see like what he did? A lot of times to get like pay and get money when his stuff wasn't doing so well, or when he couldn't really, because he was one of those that would get inspired and write, but he wasn't he would try to write all the time, but it wasn't always considered good, and sometimes he'd lift passages from other writers and put them in his. So he had been accused of plagiarism. He's just trying to publish stuff to get it out to make money.
Yeah.
A lot of times. And it said that one of the things that he would do, let's see, where is it? On 1660 it says, like I was saying just now, it says, in a desperate effort to meet a deadline, many of his speculations Coleridge merely confided to his notebooks in the ears of his friends, incorporated in letters and poured in the margins of his own. Wait, where is it? Let me see. Oh yeah, here we go. It says, after the Ancient Mariner, most of the poems he completed were written like the first version of Dejection and Ode in a spasm of intense effort. Writings that required sustained planning and application were either left unfinished or, like Biographica Literaria, made up of brilliant sections padded out with filler, sometimes lifted from other writers. So he actually would plagiarize in order just to get things published. Sometimes. And let me see, where was it? They said that he had indolence capable of energies, and it's true that while his mind was incessantly active and fertile, he lacked application and staying power. He also manifested early in life in a profound sense of guilt and need for public expiation. Let me see, where's what he did for Hold on, give me a second. I gotta find this because I want to make sure that I get it right. Here we go. So it says in the paragraph up above, in fact, I might just grab my pencil and mark this because I'm always looking for it every time that we talk about it. So it says at the top of 1659 in the paragraph that's next, under these conditions, Coleridge's literary efforts, however sporadic and fragmentary, were a little short of heroic. In 1808, he debuted as a speaker at one of the new lecturing institutions that sprang up in British cities in the early 19th century. His lectures on poetry, like his later series on Shakespeare, became part of the social calendar for fashionable Londoners. Women, excluded still from universities, particularly. So he would give lectures, and I think one of the reasons that he was able to kind of sustain himself a little bit on that was because he would go and talk to groups of women because they couldn't go to university at the time. And so he found that as kind of an opportunity he could take advantage of. He's like, and he was known as a great public speaker and very interesting to listen to, but still, note that he was not invited to the universities. He spoke instead to those that he could speak to because he was an opportunist. In fact, I don't even think I would consider it to be like, I wouldn't consider it to be like, oh, so proud of Coleridge for providing lectures to those at the time who were disenfranchised. I don't really think it's that at all. I think it was just he could speak to them because that's where he could get in, so he did. And then it comes across as like it's like mistaken history. Like you look back and you realize, oh, he wasn't really like any kind of feminist. That's where he could make a buck. You know? I don't know. I find the guy delightful. He's fantastic. Poor guy only lived to 52 though. Probably health problems. Did you know that Wordsworth lived like 80? He's old. He was old when he died. Wordsworth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think he actually was born before Coleridge and then died way, way after. So we don't have nearly as much time as I would like to talk about Don Juan, but I got the sense that most people didn't spend all their time reading that one anyway. Because that one, while extremely fun, is very long. And I actually think it's not that difficult to understand, but it still is pretty difficult at times. I think some of the important stuff that we would want to talk about is... Well, anybody have any questions about Coleridge at all, or stuff that you would want to bring up before we move on to Byron? Y'all didn't have any major pressing questions. Shocked at this. Byron, Don Juan. By the way, did I tell you I was pronounced Don Juan?
No. Yes, you did.
Oh, I did?
Yes, Don Juan.
Okay. He was pronounced like that in the English fashion.
I was confused why everyone is pronounced, or like everyone is said Don or Donna. Is that like an Italian thing? Because he said the protagonist is based off of his brother.
Yeah, they're from Spain.
Okay.
So I think that it's kind of like, it's almost like the word sir there, I think. That was just a term of respect or...
Like Miss Jula.
Kind of like Mr. and Miss, yeah. I think that's kind of how it functions. I guess the French have Monsieur, and maybe Spain has Don. Sir, Mr. But it was first names they used with it. I guess if somebody's a Don, they're more respected member of the community, and then the Don is the one that's married to them.
That makes sense considering his education.
I don't know that I necessarily... Oh, man, I just would love to spend so much time talking about this. I just don't know that I... What are we reading next time? Shall we? Oh, yeah, there's no way in hell. Oh, it's just so fun.
You can tag it in.
I may take like an entire conversation that I had about Don Juan in one of the spring semester and just tack that onto the end, just in case y'all felt like you wanted more. What I really want to cover though is some of the bigger ideas here. Like, did y'all realize how the little bit that y'all read? Did y'all realize how hilarious it was, or was intended to be?
Yes, actually, because
the speaker's just goofy.
Yeah. It's almost like he's sarcastic.
Oh yeah, sarcastic a lot. And then the telling of the story itself. Did y'all notice what he was talking about? He wants the hero that he wants from the story. He says, "I wanted a hero, an uncommon want. When every year and month sends forth a new one, till after cloying the gazettes with Kant, the age discovers he is not the true one. Of such as these I should not care to vaunt. I'll therefore take our ancient friend Don Juan. We have all seen him in the pantomime, sent to the devil somewhere his time. So he says, Don Juan's the hero I want. Did y'all notice anything weird about this hero? And the stuff that happens with him in the story.
He's a bit dumb to like.
I think he's dumb in one sense, but not the sense that.
No, like,
how do you say it?
Not like overall, but like he doesn't have common sense. He's dumb in the common sensical way. Like he doesn't really understand like things he feels or like things he thinks, and he doesn't really do a lot of critical thinking, I think.
I think that was intentionally avoided with him. Like his mom didn't want to teach him any of that stuff.
Well, yeah, that's for sure, but that's what I mean. Like that's a bit off with him. Like typically, protagonist or someone you look up to, and he's just kind of a common Joe who wasn't taught a certain amount.
And I think you're right. And I think that something that manifests in the story is a lack of his common sense, at least in the first canto, and I'm pretty sure it continues throughout, is he's a hero who doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Like, things happen to him, but he's never, like, an actor.
He just reacts.
Yes, it's like he's the reactor. He's in the reacting role. And in a sense, what happens here is, like, the story we get in the beginning about the dad and the mom. The dad and the mom basically hate each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't wish each other to be divorced. They wished each other to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
So they wish each other not divorced but dead. She teaches Don Juan
all
all sophisticated stuff, right? Great literature, the sciences. But there was one science that he wasn't allowed to learn, which was what?
No, her favorite was no. Was biology?
Getting closer.
Chemistry. Why is chemistry any closer to biology?
It's actually within biology.
Yeah.
Specific aspects.
Sex.
Yeah, anything that had to do with sex. Not only like human sex, like anatomy, or sex ed, but also animals, if there was any kind of hint of animal sex. Pistil and stem on plants. No.
Yeah, this is like a huge. I think this is a great example of censorship.
She wanted him to learn mythology without learning sexual things. So, like, Zeus had sex with, like, everybody, and all of his children are mythology.
Zeus just didn't exist. What do you mean?
Yeah, it was like, and then Zeus made this person. Well, how'd that happen? Don't ask questions. Just happened.
He just made it.
Now, there are some that he did spontaneously, like Athena.
Yeah.
But-
And Aphrodite is not his kid.
What?
Aphrodite is Zeus' kid. Aphrodite.
Who is it, Leto?
Aphrodite is from, like, directly from Uranus and Gaia.
Oh, that's Roman mythology, right?
No.
Uranus is Roman.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's the sky? What's the sky? I know
The sky is just called sky,
Well,
and the earth is earth in
Okay,
Greek mythology.
so-
Greek mythology, there's a name for
there's a name to the sky. The sky, the Titan. Okay, so
Titus Terra.
Shush. Let me explain something. So the same curse that Cronus had, like where his oldest kid would kill him, the sky had when he gave birth to the Titans, or when he had the Titans with Earth. And so the Titans existed, and there was a curse that the Titans would overthrow the sky, which they did. And when the Titans' genitals, when the sky's genitals fell into the sea, Aphrodite became of the sea foam.
Oh, right, yeah. Because foam is the word Aphrodite comes from. Did we talk about this last semester? I feel like we did. I feel like this is a discussion we already had. Anybody shaking their head no? I think it's just because didn't remember. We talked about Aphrodite and foam. I know we mentioned those words because I remember saying it before. Let's see. So he has Don Juan, ends up coming into contact with one of his tutors. And really, I think it's his main tutor, and she's a hot young woman. He's 16, she's 23. He's extremely physically capable because she's also taught him the arts of war. It says in here that he was taught to scale the walls of a fortress.
Yeah, I was like, why would he need to know that, but not like basic human stuff?
It also says like he was taught to scale the walls of a fortress or a nunnery, meaning like while she's teaching him to scale the walls of a fortress, that could also be used for other things you could scale.
Okay, so
Like you'd also climb the walls and get to ladies.
that's definitely gonna take more. That's gonna take more shape than like chapter 2 or whatever. Because at the end of this one.
Yeah, at the end of this one, it's pretty funny. Where like he's accusing Donna Julia's.
Alfonso is accusing Julia of cheating.
Yeah, Alfonso's like, you're cheating, and she's like, no, I'm not. And she's like, how dare you accuse me? While Don Juan is in the bed. Because they looked underneath the bed, they looked everywhere else in the room. They didn't look in the bed. Well, who would think that? Who would leave their lover within the bed? And she did, and then like Don Alfonso realizes, wait, those are man shoes, and then like then Don Juan's naked and has a sword fight, like literal sword fight, with Don Alfonso, and they fight, and Don Juan wins because he's extremely capable. But it's like none of this stuff is really like his doing. It's like he got kind of wooed by Donna Julia, and like love just sort of happens to him. It's not like he goes and like pursues her. She shows up at his house, then they make love, and says, as she said to herself, "I'll never consent." She consented, because that's just how the story goes. Like Don Juan's just sort of there, and everybody else has the story, and he just sort of gets used as like a story prop. It's so weird.
A plot device.
Yeah, it's a plot device. And when you said dumb, I was thinking like in the old sense of dumb, like mute.
Yeah.
He kind of is almost mute.
He doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't say anything.
He says some. Maybe he might say some. I don't know. I know there's a time where he's specifically thinking things.
Yes.
So he's having thought. What?
More like showing his perspective through that.
Yes, he's like thinking about the universe and like the stars and how everything works in physics, and then he starts thinking about her eyes. And he said that, like, what does it say? There's something in here where it says
I don't know, man.
something like, I think that love this did, and it says, I can't help but think that puberty assisted.
I think. I don't know. I read this one entire.
Yes, this is the part. Let's see. It says, do you think it was philosophy that this did? Getting him to think about all the stuff in the universe. And he says, I can't help thinking puberty assisted. He's just like, oh, I love the world, and the world is wonderful. And then, like, we see Julia ends up getting caught, and she goes to a nunnery and writes him a letter. Confessing her love, but we just can't do this. And he just, you don't really get his, like, response. And I love when she's like, I just love it when she's accusing him of, like, her husband of calling her a cheater, and that's exactly what she did. But it sounded like something somebody would really do, where it's just like, how dare you? But it's, like, legit.
Even though I'm texting my other girlfriend.
Did you happen to know that he made fun of Wordsworth and Coleridge in this?
Yeah, he does it at the end, right? Like, towards the end?
Yeah, he says, thou shalt believe in Milton, Dryden, Pope. Thou shalt not set up Wordsworth, Coleridge, Southey, because the first, Wordsworth, is crazed beyond all hope. Yeah. The second, Coleridge, drunk. And the third, so quaint and mouthy.
Which, I mean, isn't wrong, of Coleridge at least.
Yeah, he was always drunk.
I mean, Wordsworth was a bit sane, actually.
And he tells, like, who y'all should pay attention to in terms of writers and critics and things, kind of a little bit like Pope does slightly. And at the very end, he pleads with his readers. He says, but for the present, gentle, and I feel like this is happening kind of at the same time as Coleridge, so it's very interesting to me that you have Coleridge having these speakers set up where they're kind of being playful with the audience, and you have Don Juan here doing the same thing. Byron's doing it, where he's, after he talks about all the stuff, then he's talking to the readers about like what his plans are for the rest of it. And he does actually sort of follow through on most of them. And he says near the end, he says, but for the present, gentle reader, and still gentle purchaser, because he was publishing this in pieces. It's one of the ways that Dickens, Charles Dickens, made a lot of money, was he published things in installments. And so he gets people to like get hooked on the Canto 1. And so then it's just like sequels these days. You know how like they keep pumping sequels at us, and a lot of people are starting to get tired of them. Yeah. And like people I think are almost getting tired of like the Marvel universe. It's like, okay, I got it. Like, so many Avengers. It's getting a little boring. can't relate because you just like all of it.
Yeah.
At least they're moving on to different stories in some areas, but like some people are starting actually, I think, to finally get like tired of Fast and Furious.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh look, another one. Even like if it's good, you're just like, I'm so tired of it.
Like crap out number 8 or something. Yeah.
Sort of. Now, luckily, this is all like one story that most of these people were telling. What was it called? Fast, the Fate of the Furious?
Yeah.
Why didn't they make it the 8th part with a number? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I thought that would have been better. So, when he's talking to the purchaser here, he's actually pleading with the person, like, the next people who are going to buy this. He's hoping that some people buy the first installment and they, like, get really into it, and then they go and they buy the second installment. Did any of y'all do that where, like, you read, like, Harry Potter 1 and 2 from, like, a library, and then, like, when it started actually coming out as a book you could buy, you would go and buy it? I've done that with some series before. It's like, I'll read the first few books, but then I'm not caught up on the last ones, and so I end up actually just purchasing those.
Yeah.
Because I like really want to see them. So he's hoping to get people like that reading his installments. It's genius. And what's really funny here is he kind of does a similar Coleridge thing in the very last stanza that we read. And he says, "Go, little book." And it's interesting, it starts with a quote, right? He says, "Go, little book, from this my solitude, I cast thee on the waters. Go thy ways. And if, as I believe, thy vein be good, the world will find thee after many days." And he said, "When Southey's read and Wordsworth understood, I can't help putting in my claim to praise. The 4 first rhymes are Southey's every line. For God's sake, reader, don't take them from mine." So his very last stanza in Canto 1 is actually the first 4 lines are stolen from somebody else. And it basically says, "Go, little book, on thy way." And at the very end he says, "Please don't mistake the words at the beginning of this for mine." Yet he does use that as his closing. So he's saying, like, this is the closing for his book. Those words were stupid. But then he gives you nothing else. So those are his closing words. Like, they're being so playful, him and Coleridge both. And I wish we had more time with this. I might just tack on the rest in case people wanted a greater understanding. It might actually help with some of the quiz questions. I can't remember what the quiz questions are. So, over the weekend, make sure you turn in Synthesis Analysis Essay 1 on Sunday. Or just the only Synthesis Analysis Essay on Sunday. Also do the discussion post for Shelley and Keats. Do not write about To Autumn. And I'd really prefer people talk about probably 1 or 2 or 3 different poems this time on the discussion post and not just stick to one because they're all so short.
I always talk about 2.
Let's have everybody do it. I need more. And I'll be out of town this weekend, so if y'all try to email me and I'll get back to you immediately, that's probably why. I'm being forced to swim in a pool, and I hate swimming in pools. Love you, honey. Yeah.
I'm getting my routine taken out tomorrow.
Okay.
So I might need you to have to like resend the discussion question quiz.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure how good I'm gonna be doing.
Over the course of the weekend?
Yeah.
All 4 of them?
All 4 of them. Me too. At once.
So cruel. You who too?
No, she's making an odd joke. She doesn't understand what's going on. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah, but you don't know how many jokes in her situation. I know.
Okay, stop recording.